Hey guys, it's Kira, and I know it's been a bit since I have posted a video. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to break this up. I have 3 different things I'm going to do for this video. First of all, I'm going to talk about kind of like where I've been, what I've been up to, and kind of like why I took a break. Also, the next portion of this is going to be a special announcement for something fun that's coming up starting next month. And then the third part of this video is actually going to be talking about a little bit about what I read in January, which wasn't a whole lot. But the fact that I managed to get through like as much as I did is still really impressive for me, considering the fact that I've been going through a major reading slump. So let's go ahead and get into it. If you guys are not interested in watching everything, I went ahead and put timestamps down in the description below so that it's easily accessible for you to get to any part of the video that you want to watch. Where have I been? So I haven't actually filmed like in quite a few months. I know I stopped posting videos, I want to say about a little over a month ago, but I had actually not filmed almost like since before Christmas. Basically, like most of the videos like that I had were pre-filmed. Well, I've kind of been going through some stuff. I have been kind of like an emotional like wreck a little bit, and my anxiety's been like really high, and I'm not gonna get like too much like into that because I don't want it to be triggering for you guys, but it's been just kind of like, you know, up and down with that. Towards the end of December, I also found out that I was anemic. Extremely anemic, like so anemic that they were trying to get me to go for iron injections just to try to up my iron like a little bit. But being the fact like that I am very much like into diet and holistic type stuff, I opted to experiment with increasing like my iron in my diet and taking a supplement. So as it stands like right now, I still have not gone for the iron infusions, and I'm going to talk to my primary care again about retesting me to see like if it's made a difference. If it hasn't, then I'm gonna like look into doing the iron infusions into my blood. To me, like iron infusions like are a little bit extreme, and I like to do like one step at a time. I want to make sure like that I want to make sure like that what I can do for myself is this. If not, then in the future I'm gonna have to get iron infusions regularly. But I'll know that like when I get more on the blood test. If you follow me like on my other social media like Instagram and Twitter, then you guys will be able to kind of stay up to speed on all of that. I don't really talk about a lot of that on this channel, considering the fact that this is mainly a book channel. Also, towards the beginning of November, my baby girl Alaska went through a really terrible bout of GI stasis, wherein her GI tract just completely almost came to a complete standstill, which is actually a huge problem with little rabbits and rabbits in general. And this hasn't happened like in years. She's almost 8 years old. And so like she actually hasn't had this issue at all like for years. So I went in there like one day and she just seemed really uncomfortable. She wasn't drinking, she wasn't eating, she just seemed very mopey. And usually like with prey animals like rabbits, like you can't like really tell that they are having issues until like it gets really bad. So the fact that she showed me like that she was having issues was kind of a big deal. So I had to rush her to the vet. She spent all day at the vet. He had to put like 5 rounds of a tonic like in her to try to get her hydrated. She was like on 5 different medications for like a good month, like a good like 2 or 3 weeks after that. And so like that pretty much took the majority of my time, because I was trying to make sure like that she was, you know, doing okay. And then I want to say towards the end of December, beginning of January, her eyes started tearing again. She's 8 years old, and she's beginning to get cataracts already, which is really devastating to me because she's already deaf. She cannot hear as a rabbit. Like, I mean, you clap behind her, she shows nothing like that she's even been affected by that. And so like I've always taken her care very, very seriously, because she's always been kind of like a really sensitive rabbit. She's a purebred, she's a Hunlop, she's my little baby, and I do have 2 rabbits. But my other rabbit is super, super healthy. She doesn't really have like all those issues, which I'm very lucky for, knock on wood. But so my little girl has been taking a lot of my time, because I do consider myself a fur baby mother, and I take my job very seriously for that, because I love them very much and I want only the best for them. I have been having to deal with that. We got some good news though, because the vet thought that she had this bacteria, I think it was E. coli, that is kind of an incurable bacteria for rabbits. And so he tested her for that, and we got some good news that she doesn't have that. So we can actually look at other options as far as treating her cataracts. But the problem is that because of her cataract starting, she's getting inflammation inside and outside the eye, which is also like leading her not to be able to see very well, and sometimes she runs into the hay that she eats and it scratches her cornea. She had a lesion on her eyeball for a while that actually like did get better after like several rounds of antibiotic, or like both oral and eye drop. But this time around, fortunately, she doesn't have to have the oral antibiotic. She is only on the, you know, antibiotic for her eyes, and she's only on the anti-inflammatory. So I'm very, very relieved for that. Now, as far as my personal stuff has been going with my emotions and stuff like that, I've been dealing with a lot, and it has not put me in the best mood to film. And at this point, like, I kind of just got to a point like where I just feel like either I put myself in the middle of distractions, or I'm going to end up sinking even further into not only a reading slump, but also into a very depressive state. So this is me trying to carry on and hope for the best and try to maintain a positive mental attitude, because I always feel like trying to maintain that attitude is very important. Now, I do give myself time like to grieve and to feel and everything, and it's been so difficult, but I can't let myself slip that far. I cannot let myself like get to that point like where I don't care, because like caring sometimes, like some days caring is very hard, and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. Sometimes caring takes a lot of effort, it takes persistence, it takes resilience, and at times, like, I take a moment to catch my breath. At times, like, you know, you just don't want to. You just don't. So that's kind of like what I've been dealing with. And you know, sometimes like you just have to cheer yourself up, which is exactly what I'm doing, which is why I'm here. So I don't like want to get too much more into it. As far as the circumstances regarding my emotions, like that's also something I'm not going to touch base with, because it is kind of personal. It's still very fresh. I may at one point discuss it on this channel, but right now it's just a very sensitive topic, and it's been kind of a struggle for me. All I'm gonna say is, like, you know, like there's times like where you feel like something will never end, and you hope that it won't, and you hope that you'll be able to find a resolution for those circumstances, and you hope like that things will turn out for the best, and they don't. They don't. So let's go ahead and stop with that, because like we want to move on and we don't want to think about these things. I'm trying, like I said, positive mental attitude. I'm going to go ahead and get into the announcement, which is really exciting, that is going to be starting next month. So I have never read this series before. This is A Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I have read her newest series, Strange the Dreamer, which I absolutely like. That book, like those books, like were extremely slow burn, and I really, really enjoyed them. I really struggled like with the slow burn part, but the poise and like the everything like in it was just so absolutely beautiful, and I loved it so much. I thought it was so amazing. So this is actually the series that she came out with before Strange the Dreamer. And starting next month in March, we are going to be, me and some awesome ladies from Twitter are going to be reading this book. And I think we talked about doing live discussions, but I'm going to leave a link. There is a Twitter page that we actually established, and I'm going to leave a link for that Twitter page in the description below, so that you guys can follow any progress, any announcements, anything like that we're going to be doing like with this read along. And you guys are more than welcome to join us for this. This is my first time reading this series, and this is a very popular series. So in March, we're going to be reading the first book, which is A Daughter of Smoke and Bone. This is the very first book. This is actually the shortest book out of all three of them, and I've been dying to get to the series. So for those of you guys who don't know what this is about, the tagline is, once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well. Around the world, black handprints are appearing on doorways, scorched there by winged strangers who have crept through a slit in the sky. And in the tangled lanes of Prague, a young artist student named Krau is about to be caught up in a brutal, otherworldly war when a stranger, beautifully haunted Akiva, fixes his fire-colored eyes on her. The result is a star-crossed love whose roots drink deep, of a violent past. From the master storyteller, the National Book Award finalist Lanny Taylor comes a sweeping and gorgeously written modern fantasy about a forbidden love, an ancient epic battle, and hope for a world remade. This just sounds amazing. So I'm really, really excited for this. This is actually one of the 10th anniversary edition covers, and it's so beautiful. Now, in April, we're going to be reading the second book, which is Days of Blood and Starlight, which is the second book in the series, which is considerably thicker, but I am super excited for this. And then May, we're going to be reading Dreams of Gods and Monsters, which is, coincidentally enough, the thickest book in this series. I am so excited. I've been dying to read this series, and I'm going to be having so much fun buddy reading this with a bunch of wonderful ladies on Twitter. So definitely go ahead and follow that page. I am co-hosting with them, and if you follow that page, you'll be able to get all of the updates. Alright, now we are going to be on to everything that I read in the month of January. The only reason I read about 9 books in the month of January, and the only reason I read that much is because I started the first day of the month, I started out strong, and I read all 5 mangas of Spell of Desire. And this is a paranormal romance between a witch and a wizard. And it is a manga. We definitely have some sexy time going on. And this is actually one of those mangas that's really graphic, so there is nudity in here. And this is my first time ever reading anything remotely like this. There was boobs and everything else. So not sure if that's kind of your thing, or if you like the steamy kind of mangas, but that's kind of what we have going on here. The first 3 books, I rated them all a 3 out of 5 stars. And the last 2 books, I rated them each 4 out of 5 stars. Now, my major problem with this series itself is the fact that they kind of used sexual definition for the main character. And what I mean by that is it's almost like she didn't gain her power until she became sexualized. That really, really bothered me, that she had to become sexualized to have a power. Now, I did like the main love interest to a certain extent. Even he was a little bit on a gray area for me. He seemed like he was, at first he was there because the main character, Kokoro, she actually is the daughter of the Witch Queen, and she's coming into her power, but in order to fully come into her power, she has to lose her virginity and become super sexualized. Now, I know that's probably part of the whole point of this, it's supposed to be steamy and romantic and everything. And then she actually ends up encountering the Witch Queen's primary knight named Hibiki. And of course he's very handsome and debonair and very interesting. And while he's extremely good looking, we're not going to discount that, but while he's extremely good looking, he kind of pushes that, topic, hey, you can be really powerful, if you only lost your virginity, I'd be more than happy to take it from you. So to me, there was kind of a little bit of a problematic element to this series. Now, as it got further into the series, after the first 3 books, we got into the last 2, where that wasn't as much of an issue, and it became a little bit more romantic, where Hibiki was, kind of trying to protect the main character, and how he was actually seemed like he really cared, and it wasn't just a over-sexualized scenario. So the series definitely did grow on me, and I did really enjoy the resolution and everything that happened towards the end of it. But the first 3 books for me were kind of a struggle, and I don't really I wasn't super acclimated to exactly what was happening in this. So overall I enjoyed it, but it definitely started out weaker than it did towards the end, and at the end it was definitely a lot stronger. So if you are into paranormal romance mangas about 2 witches and you want some steamy stuff going on, then these are definitely a good read for you. But like I said, just a lot of over-sexualization of the main character, and that really just kind of irked me. The next book that I read is How the King of Alfheim Learned to Hate Stories. This is actually 3.5 in the Wicked King series, which is also known as the Folk of the Air series. This is also a relatively short book, and while the Folk of the Air trilogy primarily took place from Jude's perspective, this book actually took place primarily from Cardin's perspective, and it was kind of neat. So I do recommend that if you are if you enjoyed or want to read this book, that you make sure that you read all 3 of the first books first. Like, you should definitely like read those first, because the short stories like that are in How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, actually, like, they're kind of like inserts like sporadically throughout all 3 books, and then you get to the resolution like at the end of that book. So definitely make sure that you read The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing, all before you read How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. I actually really enjoy this because if you're a fan of that series, it was a really good compliment to that series. And you got to hear, like, you know, how Cardan felt about Jude throughout everything. You got to hear like about like how a little bit more like emotionally how he grew up and how rough it was for him, and it kind of gave you a better overall perspective of Cardan's position throughout the other stories, which I really appreciate. That I really thought it was a good story. For that, I actually ended up giving like that a 4 out of 5 stars because I just really enjoy that. I actually really love that series. And I don't feel like The Queen of Nothing was the strongest ending to that series, but I really like the characters and I like the romance like in it and everything. And so it was kind of nice like just to have a little bit more from that world like that I could just kind of entertain myself with. So definitely 4 out of 5 stars if you like that series and you prefer like the first 2 books, like, and you've read the 3rd book but wasn't a huge fan. I do still think that you would enjoy the 4th book. This book is for all of my fans of Bridgerton. I watched Bridgerton probably like towards the end of December, beginning of January, something like we're around there. I did it basically close to the time like when it actually came out, and I wasn't sure about it like when I first started watching it, but like it was a very steamy kind of romance, and it's a Regency romance, and I was kind of like craving like a little bit something else. So I ended up reading a book called The Beast of Beswick by Emily Howard, which I thought was a lot of fun because like it was kind of a combination of a Beauty and the Beast retelling in a Regency type era without any of the fantastical elements. And I really loved that about this book. So it was very contemporary, like there was like no extra like, you know, mysticism or anything else like that. So Lady Astrid Everly was like this kind of like really well educated, kind of like book nerd. She was very smart for her time, very ahead of her time, very feisty. Reminds me of Belle. We have the love interest, which is Lord Nathaniel Hart, who is the disagreeable Duke of Beswick. And I didn't love him, especially towards the beginning, but I actually found him like more endearing than I did anything else. Lady Astrid Everly is like in her, I want to say like early 30s, and she has had her reputation smeared by another duke that she did not agree to marry because like he was just kind of a slime ball. Well, being the fact that she's been disgraced, her younger sister's name has also been kind of like dragged through the ringer. And that same duke that dragged her reputation through the ringer is now trying to pry upon her little sister. So in desperation, she goes to the Beast of Beswick and begs him to marry her and form an arrangement to where like that would be beneficial to them both, because the Beast of Beswick had kind of like a facial deformity from the war. And so he didn't go out in public a lot. He had like no desire to get married and very like little opportunity for himself to go and meet somebody because he doesn't really leave his property. So in all of that, she felt like this was a perfect opportunity. And of course, like, you know, steaminess ensues. And like there's a lot of back and forth, like a lot of doubt. In a lot of ways, like this is a very traditional like back and forth like angsty type romance. But also like in a lot of ways, it kind of fed my continuing like wanting of a little bit something like more like that was kind of a Bridgerton style feel, but with a Beauty and the Beast element. This is another book that I ended up rating a 4 out of 5 stars because it was just a lot of fun, and I'm a huge fan of Beauty and the Beast in general, so I really enjoyed this. So the 8th book that I read in the month of January is actually Tomi by Junji Ito. So, a few months ago, I actually sat down and I read Uzumaki by Junji Ito, and I ended up rating this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I have not talked about this on my channel because I didn't do a wrap-up for that month, but this is actually like, this inspired me to read his other work. Now, Uzumaki is about spirals, like, and I will never look at a spiral the same like way again. It's about a town that's haunted by spirals. I really loved it because like, a lot of the stories in here were extremely interconnected, but you didn't realize how they were connected until towards the end. It wasn't like a lot of people say like that his books are the type of books that you cannot fall asleep to. Well, I didn't have the problem like where I couldn't read this book at night, like where I had trouble sleeping, but I can tell you like right now, like that this book follows me wherever I go. It kind of haunts me now, but not like in a scary like haunt way, but in a way that pretty much every time I see a spiral, and they do talk like a lot about spirals, even curly hair like mine is also considered a spiral. And fingertips are considered spirals. There's a concule in the ear that's a spiral. Snails have spirals. So every time I see a spiral, I think of this book. And this book just haunts me all the time. I will never be able to look at spirals again. And I did end up rating Uzumaki a 4 out of 5 stars because all the short stories throughout this actually just kind of came together so seamlessly at the end. And the ending was a little bit disturbing, and I loved it. It was so good. This is also another manga. It's just huge. It's got like everything in it. Pretty much like issues like 1 through 3. This is the full hardback one that has the whole collection in it. Well, after I read this, I've been dying to locate Tomi, and finally Amazon got this back in stock and I splurged on it because I really wanted to read it. This is about a girl who keeps, I don't know, she's so beautiful like that she keeps inspiring men to hack her to pieces, and then like each piece kind of revives itself into Tomi, which is the original person. Tomi is like this beautiful girl, like, and everybody wants her, and men just become so obsessed with her like that they just can't think about anything else, and they need her constant validation. So I was a little bit more disappointed with this book. This book is also very much in the same kind of format that Uzumaki was, like where they have a lot of different like little short stories towards the beginning, and they are somewhat connected, but I don't feel like the overall resolution of this book was the same clean finish that Uzumaki was. I enjoyed this, I really did. I loved like how kind of creepy it was, but it also felt really repetitive in comparison to Uzumaki. And the entire time I read this, because I loved Uzumaki so much, I just kept comparing this to Uzumaki. And Tomi is the one that Junji Ito is supposed to be really known for, but I liked it, but I didn't love it, and like it doesn't haunt me the same like way Uzumaki does. Like I still kind of think about it from time to time, but like I don't feel like over like the long span that this is going to be as memorable as Uzumaki was. So I was really actually pretty disappointed like with this in comparison to Uzumaki. I ended up rating Tomi a 3 out of 5 stars. This was written back in 1987 originally, so it is definitely like an 80s Japanese horror, and just, it was pretty much like I would consider one of my bigger letdowns for January. I still recommend like that if you enjoy manga horror to check this out, but in the greater scheme of things, in my personal opinion, I felt Uzumaki was definitely a stronger book in the world of manga horror. So I am not a huge fan of DNFing books. It's not something like that I typically make a habit of, especially not so early in the year. I try to power through pretty much every book, but the further I've gotten into my reading journey, the more I know whether or not a book is going to end up being enjoyable in the long term for me. That brings me to this book, The Grief Keeper. This is a really interesting book. It was very well written, so I'm not trying to detract from that at all. I really liked the messages like they had about grief and how grief affects everyone differently, and how grief is very hard and it can be traumatizing, like, you know, like coinciding with alongside grief. And basically like this is about our main character, who is 17-year-old Marisol, who her and her sister are refugees to the United States because there's a gang in El Salvador like that is looking to recruit her. And so like they're very paranoid about that whole situation, so they end up fleeing to America and are now considered American refugees. This book, like I said, was so well written, and it was so interesting. But I had a real problem with the setup. Now the setup is very intriguing. 17-year-old Marisol, in exchange of getting her United States citizenship and getting it for her little sister, decides to volunteer for an experiment that would insert microchips into her brain that allowed people who had grief to kind of like ease the load of their grief. And these are like soldiers and everything else like that have had a tremendous amount of PTSD. And it usually like worked through synaptic signals. So the person like with PTSD is considered the donor. And that person, when they have like that horrible PTSD situation, would have brain signals that would then get sent to Marisol, and then she would experience like the anxiety and the PTSD but not know why she was experiencing this. To me, like, this book felt like an exploitation of a 17-year-old girl. And I know like a lot of people really love this book, but that didn't sit right with me. I don't agree like with exploiting a 17-year-old girl who is desperate to become an American citizen and is desperate to protect her little sister, and I feel like that was completely like weaponized and used against her. And I got about 103 pages into this, and I just realized like that I could not, this didn't resonate with me. Like I liked how it was written, I liked the messages, but the way the main character was kind of like set up like in the greater scheme of things, I hated that. I was very uncomfortable with that. I think like that if somebody who's like this desperate, especially being the fact that she's still considered a minor at 17, that they're exploiting her and her desperation to use her as a lab rat. And I don't agree with that. I don't. And so as much as I really wanted to finish this, I was not vibing with it. Like it just didn't set right with me. And so I did end up DNFing it. And this was a huge disappointment because this has been on my TBR for a very long time. And I was so looking forward to getting into this. But it did not, we didn't click. It just wasn't for me. I have read some of the more positive reviews on Goodreads, and the people that seem to love this really love this. So please do not let this detract you from checking this book out and giving it a try if the premise kind of interests you, because the premise is very unique and it is very interesting. But at the same time, like, exploiting a minor because she's desperate, no. It's just a big no for me, and it just wasn't for me. But alright, so that was the last book that I read in the month of January. It was a total of 9 books, and I feel pretty accomplished because I did get through, you know, a relatively good number of books, even though I did spend the majority of January not reading. So I really hope you guys like this video. If you guys like this video, hit the little like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon if you guys want to receive emails every single time I post. I'm also on Amazon, Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. Those links are linked in the description below. And most recently, I do have a TikTok where I do have a few like little short clips uploaded on there as well. I also have that linked in the bottom. Thank you guys so much for watching my video, and I will see you guys again very soon.